In this world, every day sees thousands of people reported missing. Most of the missing individuals are eventually found. Some have run away from home, others have been kidnapped or murdered, and some have deliberately disappeared to escape reality. However, throughout human history, there have been cases of disappearances that remain unsolved, puzzling mysteries that continue to perplex people. Like many young and beautiful girls, Jean Elizabeth Spangler, born on September 2nd, 1923, in Seattle, Washington, had always dreamed of becoming a movie star, the center of attention, under the spotlight. Regrettably, what made her widely known was not her acting career, but her disappearance. After graduating from high school, Jean first worked as a dancer in some theater troupes, and occasionally as a model to make ends meet. Later, she ventured into Hollywood and played minor roles in several films, such as When My Baby Smiles at Me, directed by Walter Lang, Chicken Every Sunday, and the musical Young Man with a Horn. In 1942, Jean married businessman Dexter Benner. In 1944, their daughter Christine was born. However, their happy and sweet married life was short-lived, and they often quarreled afterward. Jean accused Benner of domestic violence, while Benner accused Jean of being an irresponsible mother. Eventually, in 1946, they chose to divorce. After the divorce, Jean and her ex-husband engaged in a long battle for custody of their daughter. Initially, Christine was awarded to Benner, but it wasn't until 1948 that Jean finally gained custody. Later, Jean moved to her mother Florence's home on Wilshire Boulevard. Jean's brother Edward had died in World War II, and his wife Sophie, unwilling to remarry, also moved in with them and helped Jean take care of Christine. On October 7, 1949, around 5:30 p.m., Jean prepared to go out and told her sister-in-law Sophie that she was going to meet her ex-husband to collect overdue child support and then go to the movie set for a night shoot. However, Sophie told Jean that she had a nightmare the night before, seeing a woman lying in a coffin, which she thought was an ominous sign. Since her husband, Edward's death, Sophie often had nightmares, and bad things often happened after her nightmares. Sophie shared her worries with Jean, but Jean dismissed them. Before leaving, she kissed her daughter's forehead and said goodbye and told her daughter and sister-in-law, "Wish me luck," then turned and left the house. 2 hours after leaving, Jean called home and told her sister-in-law that she would have to work for 8 hours straight and might not come home that night. It was not uncommon for Jean to stay out all night, and she had told Sophie that she might not come back that night. But for some unknown reason, possibly sensing that Jean might be in danger, Sophie went to the police station to report the case the next morning, on October 8th. After receiving the report, the Los Angeles police did not pay much attention. The police initially thought that it was normal for a young and beautiful single woman to stay out all night, and it was a bit of an overreaction to report a case after less than 24 hours of disappearance, especially when they were already overwhelmed with criminal cases and didn't have the manpower to investigate and follow up. So they just recorded the report and sent Sophie away. But things changed quickly. At around 11 a.m. on October 9th, a patrol officer found an abandoned handbag near the entrance of Griffith Park's Ferndale, about 9 kilometers from Jean's home. The strap of the handbag seemed to have been forcibly torn off, and it was later confirmed to belong to Jean Elizabeth Spangler. At this point, the Los Angeles police realized that something was wrong. The strap of Jean's handbag seemed to have been torn off from her arm. What puzzled the police even more was that there was a note in Jean's handbag addressed to Kirk, which read, "Can't wait any longer. Going to see Dr. Scott. It will work best this way while Mother is away." The note was unsigned and ended with a comma, and handwriting analysis confirmed that it was Jean's handwriting, leading the authorities to believe that Jean was in a hurry when she wrote it or encountered something that prevented her from finishing. Afterward, 60 police officers and 140 volunteers conducted a thorough search of the surrounding area, but found no clues. Soon, the case was widely reported by the media. Who is Kirk mentioned in the note? Who is Dr. Scott? Are they related to Jean's disappearance? Since Jean mentioned in the note that she was going to see Dr. Scott, Los Angeles Police Deputy Chief Ted Brown decided to investigate every doctor named Scott in Los Angeles, hoping to find a breakthrough to locate Jean. Soon after, Deputy Chief Ted Brown received a call from a Hollywood superstar named Kirk Douglas, who said he was on vacation in Palm Springs and saw the report of Jean's disappearance in the newspaper. He voluntarily told Deputy Chief Brown that he was not familiar with the missing girl, and that Jean was an extra in the film he starred in, Tish. However, under Deputy Chief Brown's questioning, Kirk Douglas admitted that he had talked and kidded with her a bit on the set, but he had never had any contact with Jean outside the set. On October 12, 1949, Kirk Douglas issued a formal statement in which he said, "I told Deputy Chief Ted Brown that I didn't remember the girl's name until a friend reminded me that she was the extra in Tish." On the other hand, investigators interviewed all the doctors named Scott in Los Angeles, but they were all ruled out as suspects. At this time, the police received a call from a friend of Jean who said that Jean had told her about her pregnancy before she disappeared. Investigators also learned from other sources that there was a man nicknamed Doctor who, despite only having some basic medical training, often solicited business on Sunset Boulevard, secretly performing abortions for women who wanted to terminate their pregnancies for a fee. In 1947, abortion was illegal in the United States, but many actresses in the 1940s often had abortions. Marilyn Monroe admitted to had 12 abortions. The film studios did not need pregnant actresses, which also gave rise to the industry of underground abortion. Despite the police deploying a large number of police officers to search, they still did not find the fake doctor who performed abortions. Following the clues provided by the note, it seemed to have reached a dead end. Investigators decided to delve into Jean S. interpersonal relationships and reconstruct her whereabouts a few hours before her disappearance. According to the information provided by her sister-in-law, Sophie, Jean had told her before leaving home that she was going to ask her ex-husband for overdue child support and then go to the set to film at night. So the police interviewed Jean S. ex-husband Benner, but he claimed that he had not seen his ex-wife for several weeks. His new wife, Lynn Lasky Benner, confirmed his statement. At the same time, another team of investigators visited the film studios that were filming in Los Angeles at the time and learned that there were no night shooting schedules arranged on October 7th. During this period, the police received several clues from reporters, and based on these clues, the investigators roughly sorted out Jean's possible whereabouts on the night of her disappearance. On October 7th, around 5:30 p.m., Jean said goodbye to her daughter and sister-in-law and then left home. Around 6 p.m., the owner of a grocery store a few blocks away from Jean's residence saw her hanging around in the store, seemingly waiting for someone. Around 7:30 p.m., Jean made a public phone call to her home, informing Sophie that she would not be coming home that night due to the night shoot. On October 8th at 1:30 a.m., Terry Taylor, the owner of a cheese restaurant on Sunset Boulevard, saw Jean sitting with a man in his 30s who had brown-black hair and was well-groomed, of medium build. Manager Terry claimed to know Jean, as she often visited his restaurant. Joseph, a magazine vendor at the restaurant's entrance, also confirmed manager Terry's account. On October 8th at 2 a.m., radio host Lazar saw Jean at the cheese restaurant on Sunset Boulevard. He said that Jean was sitting with two men, and the three seemed to be arguing about something. He wanted to greet Jean, but one of the men waved him away. On October 8th, in the early morning, Art Rogers, a gas station attendant at 8400 Sunset Boulevard, saw a man driving a blue-gray convertible into the gas station, with a young woman sitting in the passenger seat. The man ordered Rogers to fill the tank and said they were going to Fresno. When the man drove away, the woman in the passenger seat shouted to Rogers, "Let the police follow this car." Rogers said that the woman looked very much like the missing actress in the newspaper. Unfortunately, the police did not find the man who was with Jean, nor did they find any clues about the suspicious blue-gray convertible. However, investigators learned that Jean had a wide social circle and Campo at her home, but he always waited in the car for Jean to come out and never entered the house. Some of Jean's friends told the police that before her divorce from her ex-husband Dexter, she had an affair with a man named Scotty, an Air Force lieutenant who was known to be violent towards Jean, and had even threatened to kill her if she left him. However, her lawyer stated that Jean had ended the relationship in 1945 and had not been in contact with Scotty since then. Robert Cummings, a Hollywood star who acted with Jean in the movie Beautiful Girl, told the police that Jean had told him 2 weeks before her disappearance that she was in a new casual relationship and was enjoying this wonderful time in her life, but she did not mention the person's name. Witnesses told investigators that a week before Jean's disappearance, she was seen with Dave Ogle and John Nicely, who were both associates of organized crime boss Mickey Cohen. Strangely, Nicely had disappeared a month before Jean's disappearance, and Ogle vanished shortly after. Both were suspected of being involved in a conspiracy, and Cohen had paid $80,000 to bail them out. There was speculation that Cohen might have killed them to prevent them from becoming informants against him, and Jean might have been at the wrong place at the wrong time, with her body possibly discarded in the desert near Palm Springs. Another report to the police suggested that Jean had connections with various influential playboys in the area. She had been seen with millionaire Thomas Lee and had dated Johnny Stompanato, a bodyguard for Mickey Cohen, and a known gangster. Despite extensive investigations, the case remained unsolved. There were several theories regarding Jean's disappearance. 1. Some believed that Jean was another victim of the infamous Black Dahlia case that shocked the United States 2 years prior. The similarities between Jean and Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia victim, were noted. Both were young, attractive women in their 20s. Both were aspiring actresses in Hollywood. Both had their handbags discarded with notes inside, and both had extensive social. However, the Black Dahlia case was more gruesome, with Short's body dismembered and left in a public place, and the killer taunting the police with letters. In contrast, Jean's case did not involve dismemberment or any letters from the perpetrator. 2. Some speculated that Jean had died during an illegal abortion procedure, and the doctor involved had secretly disposed of her body to avoid being implicated. This theory was supported by the note found in her handbag, which mentioned Dr. Scott, and the fact that Jean had told a friend she was pregnant. 3. There were suspicions that Jean was killed by her ex-husband Dexter, who then disposed of her body. Jean's sister-in-law, Sophie, believed that Dexter harbored resentment over the custody battle and Jean's infidelity, and she noticed a fresh scratch on Dexter's face the day after Jean's disappearance, which she believed was a scratch from Jean. 4. Some thought that Jean might have been carrying Kirk Douglas's child and was threatening to expose their relationship, which would have severely impacted his family and career. Desperate, Kirk might have killed Jean and hidden her body. This theory was fueled by the note and Kirk's eagerness to distance himself from Jean, as well as inconsistencies in his statements to the police. 5. Others believed that Jean was killed by gang members. Jean was known to be close to Mickey Cohen's associates, Dave Ogle and John Nicely, who disappeared around the time of Jean's disappearance. There was speculation that Cohen might have killed them to prevent them from testifying against him, and Jean was an unfortunate bystander. 6. Another theory suggested that Jean was killed by rival gang members. It was thought that Jack Dragna, a Los Angeles gang boss, ordered the murder of Ogle and Nicely as a way to strike against his rival, Mickey Cohen. Jean might have been caught up in the crossfire. Dragna's failed attempts to collaborate with or recruit Cohen's men might have motivated him to retaliate. 7. There was also a theory that Jean was killed by her former lover, Air Force Lieutenant Scotty, as a form of revenge, given his previous threats to kill her if she left him. 8. Some believed that Jean was kidnapped and murdered, based on the testimony of the gas station attendant. Jean Elizabeth Spangler's disappearance sparked a variety of public speculations, and the police have been searching for her whereabouts for years. They have issued missing person notices across the United States, trying to find any clues related to her disappearance. Although there have been reported sightings of her in California, Arizona, Texas, and even Mexico in the following years, none of these leads have been officially confirmed. To this day, Jean Elizabeth Spangler remains classified as a missing person by the Los Angeles police, and the case file still shows that the case is under investigation. 70 years on, the disappearance of Jean Elizabeth Spangler remains an unsolved mystery. Ray Frank Ricker was an American district attorney and a Republican. He served as the district attorney for Center County, Pennsylvania from 1985 to 2005. On April 15, 2005, Gricker mysteriously disappeared and has been missing ever since. Gricker was born in 1945 in Cleveland, Ohio. He obtained his Juris Doctor degree from Case Western Reserve University School of Law, and then worked as a prosecutor in Cuyahoga County, specializing in rape and murder cases. In 1980, he moved to Pennsylvania and was elected as the district attorney of Center County in 1985. Before announcing that he would not run in the 2005 election, he had been re-elected 4 times, and announced that he would start his retirement life in December 2005, shortly after his 60th birthday. At 11:30 a.m. on April 15, 2005, Gricker called his girlfriend and told her that he was driving through the Bushy Run area, northeast of the Central Hall, along Route 192. However, Gricker did not return home that night, and his wife reported him missing to the police. Gricker's schedule for the month of May was almost full. In May of that year, his red Mini Cooper was found in front of an antique shop in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, about 80 kilometers away from his residence. His cell phone was in the car and turned off, but the police did not find his keys and wallet. There was ash in the passenger seat, but Gricker and his family never smoked. The police believe that Gricker's disappearance was similar to the circumstances of his brother's suicide. In 1996, Gricker's depressed brother Roy disappeared, and a week later, his body was found in the Miami River. The authorities ruled his death a suicide. However, Gricker once told some friends that he could not believe his brother would choose to commit suicide. Gricker's laptop was found near the Susquehanna River, but the hard drive was missing. 2 months later, a woman found a laptop hard drive about 90 meters from the banks of the Susquehanna River. Investigators believe that the hard drive might belong to Gricker, but it was severely damaged. Despite data recovery efforts by the FBI and the U.S. Secret Service, no useful clues were found. In April 2009, the police revealed that someone had used Gricker's home computer to search the internet before his disappearance. Evidence showed that someone had searched for terms such as how to destroy a hard drive, how to damage a hard drive, and water damage to laptops. There are three main theories about what happened to Gricker. First, he chose suicide like his brother, and there are some similarities between the two cases. The police in charge of the case believe this theory is the most likely, although his family does not believe it. He had no history of depression or suicidal tendencies, and he was looking forward to his upcoming retirement. Second, he may have been murdered in retaliation for his work, which could have made many enemies. In 2012, a former high-ranking member of a local gang, the Hells Angels, claimed that Gricker was killed by another gang member. He said Gricker's body was hidden in a mine, but he refused to disclose the specific location. In addition, Gricker's family was also suspected by the police, but they all passed lie detector tests. Third, he wanted to start a new life and orchestrated his own disappearance. Some speculated that Gricker may have fled to Eastern Europe. He spoke some Russian and was fluent in Slovak. He had relatives in Slovenia and had visited the region in the past. After Gricker disappeared, the police received many sightings, with witnesses claiming to have seen a man resembling Gricker, but none of these leads were confirmed. In June 2011, Gricker's daughter sought to inherit her father's estate and requested the Centre County to declare Gricker dead. On July 25th of the same year, the authorities in Centre County declared Ray Frank Gricker legally dead. The Utah police had arrested a man who looked similar to Gricker, who refused to reveal his identity. However, the authorities compared the fingerprints of the two, and they did not match. The disappearance of Ray Frank Gricker has always been one of the most publicized missing person cases in the United States. The disappearance of a district attorney without warning is a big deal and has received widespread public attention. Gricker was very influential locally, said Todd Matthews, the case manager and outreach director for the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. Since the case occurred, investigators have dived into lakes to search for Gricker's body, followed up on more than 300 sightings, traveled to Slovenia to look for clues, consulted with psychiatric experts, contacted many local gang members, and even sought technical support from NASA. But many years have passed, and no one still knows the whereabouts of the prosecutor. A young woman mysteriously vanished in the Colorado mountains nearly 20 years ago, but 12 tiny pine needles hidden in her hair narrowed the investigators' search to an area at an altitude of 9,000 feet. Michelle Wallace, 25, was determined to pursue her beloved photography career after graduating from university. She had already made a name for herself in portrait photography and decided to try her hand at capturing natural landscapes. So she ventured alone into the dense forests of western Colorado. Michelle was cheerful and outgoing. Her family said she often went horse riding and rock climbing. She knew how to face difficulties and overcome challenges. Michelle called her parents almost every day to tell them where she was and what she was doing. However, when they didn't receive her call for several days, they began to panic. After the local police received an alarm call, they launched the largest search operation in Colorado's history for this area. To find Michelle, hundreds of search and rescue personnel traversed fields and mountains, searching over 1,865 square miles of land on this remote mountain. However, they did not find Michelle and her red pickup truck. It seemed as if Michelle Wallace had vanished into thin air. A week after her disappearance, the police received an important clue. A local farmer told the police that a German shepherd had run down from the mountain to his farm, and the farmer had shot and killed the dog. The dog's collar was engraved with Oogie, the name of Michelle's German shepherd. Her family became even more worried upon hearing this news because Michelle Wallace would never willingly be separated from her dog. Another farm worker provided more clues, saying that after his car broke down in the mountains, Michelle had given him a ride. He said there was a man named Roy sitting in the front of the car at the time, while he and the German shepherd sat in the back. The farm worker remembered the dog well because it was very aggressive towards him while they sat in the back seat together, and Roy was chatting with the girl in the passenger seat. He said Michelle dropped him off at a bar and continued on with Roy to where his truck was. He said he didn't know Roy's last name and hadn't seen the two people since then. The police then began looking for this mysterious man named Roy, suspecting that finding him was key to solving Michelle Wallace's disappearance. About a week later, The police found a man who matched the appearance of the hitchhiker 160 miles away in Pueblo, Colorado. It was confirmed that this man was Roy Melanson. The background check on Roy revealed that he had been convicted of sexual assault in Louisiana and Texas and had served time in prison. The police found Michelle's backpack and driver's license at Roy's home, along with a pawn ticket for a 35mm camera. There was a roll of film in the camera, and the last few photos on the roll were of Michelle's dog, Oogie, with a backpack, and the last photo was of Roy Melanson and a young woman he met in Pueblo, Colorado. However, Roy denied any involvement in Michelle's disappearance. But under police questioning, he finally admitted that while they stopped for coffee, he had sneaked out and stolen Michelle's car, saying that Michelle's dog was tied up outside at the time. Roy told the police that he had abandoned Michelle's car in Amarillo, Texas. When the police found the car, they did not find any signs of violence inside or outside, and it seemed that the fingerprints on the car had been wiped away. What's also puzzling is that this was not the only disappearance case Roy Melanson was suspected of being involved in. Not long ago, Roy's landlord in Port Arthur, Texas, also disappeared, and the police only found the woman's car. Roy was also the last person seen with her. Although the police believed that Roy Melanson was a major suspect, they did not find a body or any other evidence to charge him. Michelle's disappearance plunged her mother, Marge Wallace, into severe depression. She couldn't live without her daughter, and her entire life revolved around Michelle. One morning, Michelle's father, George Wallace, woke up to find his wife had died of suffocation after taking a large amount of barbiturates in suicide. Michelle's mother left a note with her last wish to her husband, George. When you find our daughter, please bury her next to me. Since the victim's death could not be proven, it could not be confirmed as a homicide, and the investigation into Michelle Wallace's disappearance was forced to come to a halt. It wasn't until a long 5 years later that investigators made a significant discovery. A hiker along a remote path found something that looked like human hair on the side of the road. In 1974, the Pueblo police had found Michelle's camera from a pawn shop, and there were many photos on the film, one of which showed Michelle's hairstyle similar to the hair that the hiker found. However, the case was put on hold again, and at that time, no one knew what this roll of hair meant for solving the case. Another 10 years passed without any breakthroughs until one day, homicide investigator Kathy Ireland found some information in the evidence files that had been overlooked by investigators at the time. She happened to see a comb sealed in a bag in the evidence files with Michelle's name on it. This comb contained forensic evidence that changed the course of the entire investigation. After Michelle's disappearance, no one had compared the hair samples from the hair found in the mountains. Now they were sent to forensic expert Joseph Schindler. Schindler compared the hair samples from Michelle's comb with the hair under a microscope, looking for similarities in color, density, and structure. Under the microscope, they looked extremely similar, not only in hair width, but also in medullary content in the center and middle parts of the hair. However, this was not decisive for solving the case, and the police needed more compelling evidence. With this new clue, Detective Kathy Ireland did not want the case to be shelved again. She contacted a group of scientists with a special mission and title who called themselves body farm investigators, because they could often find bodies that others could not. This team consisted of experts in various fields, and their mission was to help law enforcement find body hiding places to obtain more evidence. The body farm experts started their investigation with the roll of hair. Forensic plant ecologist Vicki Tremel was responsible for finding plant samples in the hair because these hairs had been in the wild for 5 years and might have been carried around by scavengers. Tremel needed to examine the plant samples in the hair's fine details to understand where these hairs had been in the past 5 years. There was no large amount of soil in the hair, indicating that the body had not been buried. However, there were signs of whitening, which could be due to long-term sun exposure, and this would not have happened if the hair had been buried. In addition, Vicki Tremel also found pine needles and bark fragments in the hair. The bark should come from a poplar tree growing in an open area, while the pine needles in the hair came from 2 coniferous trees, subalpine fir and Engelmann spruce. The subalpine fir grows at an altitude of more than 9,000 feet in the mountains, while the Engelmann spruce grows in damp areas, indicating that the body is likely on the north slope of the mountain range. Because there, the sunlight is not very abundant. Vicki Tremel found an area that met the above conditions about a mile away from where the hair was found 15 years ago. Soon, a search team composed of experts demarcated the area and began a grid search, with each grid point being about 1 square meter. They were only a few feet apart, searching on their hands and knees, almost lying on the ground looking for clues to solve the case. After carefully searching a grid point, the search team would move to the next one. They found nothing on the first day, but on the second day, they made an astonishing discovery. At that time, a female geologist went down the mountain to enjoy the scenery and found something that looked like a skull on her way back up the mountain. The skull had a distinct feature. Almost 20 years ago, Michelle's father had told the police that Michelle had a gold tooth, and this skull just had a gold tooth. However, the prosecutor still needed to prove that Michelle died from a violent attack rather than an accidental death. Nearly 20 years after Michelle Wallace's disappearance, a team of forensic experts searched the high-altitude forest area of western Colorado and finally found a skull. They also found some human bones nearby, which were identified by forensic criminal anthropologists as coming from a woman aged 20 to 25. This woman was thrown from the top of the mountain and fell next to a tree. The state in which her body was found explained how she rolled down. Scientists used barrels thrown from the top of the mountain to prove this hypothesis. Incredibly, the barrels fell near the skull. The body farm team also found fragments of Michelle's clothes. The zipper on her jeans was obviously torn open violently, which could serve as evidence of a violent attack. A forensic expert compared Michelle's dental records with the teeth on the skull and confirmed that they were consistent. Now, the police and the prosecutor have focused on Roy Melanson, the last person to be seen with Michelle. The prosecutor believes that Michelle stopped her car to offer a ride to Roy, whose car had broken down, and another ranch worker into town. Michelle dropped the ranch worker off near a local bar, while Roy Melanson asked Michelle to take him to where his truck was located. The kind-hearted Michelle agreed. The prosecution thinks that Roy ordered Michelle to stop the car during the trip and had her dog, Oogie, get out of the car. Then Roy became violent towards Michelle, which resulted in the zipper of her jeans being torn, and ultimately, Roy Melanson killed her. After that, Roy drove to the top of the mountain and threw Michelle's body down. Oogie, concerned for his owner's safety, ran to a ranch about 15 miles away, which might indicate that Michelle was already dead, because if she were still alive, the dog would never have left her. Later, Roy drove Michelle's car to Texas, where he used Michelle's camera and then sent it, along with the film, to a pawn shop. There is evidence that he also drove Michelle's car to buy clothes in Gunnison at that time, which indicates that he obviously knew Michelle was already dead and could not report her car stolen to the police. Just as the police decided to arrest Roy Melanson, he was serving time in a Kentucky prison for burglary, so the police transferred him to Colorado for trial. Roy denied his guilt and even refused to appear in court, so he listened to the entire trial from his cell. The prosecution asked the jury to look at the forcibly torn zipper on Michelle's jeans, combined with other physical evidence and witness testimonies. Finally, in September 1993, the jury found Roy Melanson guilty of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment. With this, the case that had been unsolved for more than 20 years was finally solved, and the murderer, Roy Melanson, was finally punished as he deserved. Michelle's father, George Wallace, chose to bury his daughter on her birthday, and in the end, fulfilled his wife's wish to bury their daughter next to her.